Welcome, everyone, to Pure Dog Talks live at 5. I am so excited to have you guys join us tonight. And we have a very special guest for you. So I'm very excited to introduce you to our guest, Katie Campbell. But as everybody's kind of coming online and getting together, as usual, I have a little bit of business for us. So, in case you haven't heard about some of our recent events, we've recently launched the cool opportunity to access our archives in a snap. I've done all the searching and hunting and pecking to go back through 588 episodes for y'all. And for the introductory price of only $1.99, you can download an entire album on, hang on to people that want to interrupt me, an entire album on topics like breeding and whelping hands on. There's a Pure Dog Talk University on dog breeding, veterinary voice, like the whole album of every single conversation that Marty and I have had. Whoops, my chair went the wrong way. And so it's fascinating. Okay. Owner handlers, love the breeds. We've got it all going for you. So don't forget, there's also our patrons group, and you can have the added perk of our Pure Pep Talk, which is a weekly text message that has some fun, upbeat messages to some of our archives, generally speaking. And the patrons membership is available to you all for as little as $10 a month. I mean, it's the price of a coffee. So that's for a month. If you haven't submitted your request for the Pure Dog Talk Patrons badge already, shoot me an email and we'll get that taken care of for you. And as always, more support gets you more access. So there's that. Just a quick note, we have three patrons retreats scheduled for this year. So if you join our patrons group, you have the opportunity to join us at some of these retreats that we have scheduled. Our first one that we have scheduled coming up is with Tacoma Kennel Club. And on July 21st, we've actually opened one of our patrons events to all exhibitors. So everybody who's coming to the dog show or lives in the area, Tacoma Kennel Club, July 21st. So this is Graham, Washington, from 9 to noon. We have an entire self-defense class taught by a professional, super duper fancy self-defense trainer that is available to all of us that drive all over hell and creation in some sketchy places. So that's a pretty big deal, and I'm pretty excited about it. If you have juniors in your life, I'm also that weekend I'm also teaching 2 separate days of juniors clinic. It's the same thing both days. So pick your day that works for you and come on down. That is free for the juniors. And that will run from about 9 to 2, 10 to 3, somewhere in there. We'll know a little bit more as we find out the schedule. And I should be able to get that out to everybody that signs up in the next couple days. Once we know when junior showmanship is being scheduled is basically what we have to work around. The next retreat we have coming up is going to be in August with the amazing, fabulous IKC dog shows in Chicago. That retreat will kick off on August 23rd. And part of what we will have that weekend is we will feature a presentation from tonight's guest, Katie Campbell. And she will talk about her amazing adventure as one of the last people, the person that was on the last trip to Africa that was BCOA sanctioned, Basenji Club of America, where they were importing stock from the country of origin. And so I'm not going to get into it. I'm going to let Katie share that with you. Katie's here to join us, so I'm very excited about that. The bottom line, you guys, is that your passion is our purpose. And so you can check all that out on the website, puredogtalk.com. Welcome, Katie. How are you this evening, my love?
Great, dearie. Thanks, sister, for having me.
I am so excited. So, just a little backstory, you guys. Katie and I have known each other for more years than we'll admit to being alive, basically. We used to travel together when we were both baby dog breeders, and I was a baby dog handler. And it's been an amazing time, basically growing up in the sport with Katie. And we used to, have so many dreams and ambitions, and here we are. I don't know if we've completely fulfilled all the dreams and ambitions we had. But Katie is someone I admire tremendously for her success in her breeding program, particularly her Basenji breeding program, where she has really had the opportunity to do what we're talking about tonight, which is incorporate um, bloodlines from other parts of the world, send her dogs to other parts of the world. And we've had a couple podcasts on this. We had Doug Johnson speaking on this. We also had Wendy Paquette speaking on these topics. But I thought this would be a really, really great opportunity to talk to someone who's been there, done that, judged overseas. I was kind of triggered by my recent judging trip, right, to South Korea, which was really amazing. So I just felt like this would be a great conversation for everybody to join us and ask questions and all that good stuff. So welcome everybody. Welcome, Katie. How you doing tonight?
Great. This is the cocktail group, right?
Yeah, no, this isn't the cocktail group, but it's okay. We have cocktails almost every night, no matter what. So it's okay. Um,
Well,
so Katie,
and in full disclosure, Laura and I have had these kinds of conversations earnestly for so many years, and I'm always reluctant to come on the show and talk to Laura because I can't do a presentation really with Laura. With Laura, it's just a conversation, and
this
the
is a
conversation
conversation.
have it's going to have debate, and we know each other too well and respect each other so much that there's no problem in saying, look, I don't see it the way you see it. And I think that's good for the viewers to see. I mean,
That's
there's
exactly why I wanted you on here, because you and I can have these conversations and share different perspectives and different
yeah,
ideas. And so I'm thrilled. It's why we are good friends and why people are going to have a good time listening tonight. So, give us a tiny little smidge of background on you. Katie has also been a podcast guest. You guys will remember when she came on and talked about Seattle Kennel Club Dog Show when it was still in downtown Seattle. She has made an absolute name for herself developing tours for the public to take through the dog show as a way to introduce people in the non-dog world to the concept of a dog show. So you guys may have heard her voice before. So tell us about Taji Basenji's, because that's what we're going to talk about tonight.
okay. So my grandmother bred a few litters of German Shepherd dogs in New York. My mother left New York, came out west, and bred Dalmatians for 40 years in the Seattle area. She fancied particularly the liver color and took them through
Mm,
World War II when commercial dog food wasn't a thing. Her husband, not my father, was he fished, and they would just take the guts from fish and hunting and put those proteins together carefully and make dog food. It was just
wow.
throwing over the top of it. I mean, things were different then, folks, and she was as good as they came at the time for a hobby breeder. But so I had Dalmatians growing up. They were my mom's breed, and I was along on her apron strings with that, but didn't ever think that I was going to get back into it and do my own thing. Then I married a man who his family came from Pomeranians,
Mm.
and he wanted out of the toy group, and I wanted out of the non-sporting group. So we sat on hounds. We decided that we really wanted a Harrier, and neither of us were strong enough in what we did. Apparently, none of the Harrier people would sell us a good dog to campaign, which now I I wonder who and what I would be if I was in Harriers instead. But so next dog breed that we looked at were Basenjis. So I did what we were told to do at the time: research the breed, look at the AKC Complete Book of Dogs, what looks good, go to a dog show, meet the people who are on top of their game, and put in a deposit and agreed to take the pick mail and show it to his championship. So that's what I did, and just
Perfect.
kind of from there.
Yeah,
So that's how.
and I've had a good bit of success from there. And so a couple of the things that I wanted to talk about when Doug was on the podcast, when Wendy was on the podcast, and as you and I have discussed, the idea of sending dogs from our breeding to other countries, and that with the idea that eventually you'll get something back, and that sort of mix and match. And you and I were laughing the other night when we were talking about it, because in wire hair pointers in my breed, we don't sell dogs to Germany, for God's
Mhm.
sake. Right? Like, they sell dogs to us. So it's not something in this particular piece that I have that much experience with.
Well, okay, so um I early in my Basenji breeding times, I was really just fascinated with, talking with people from other countries that had the breed. And I, like so many of your audience members, I was really into researching. I was just drinking it all up, couldn't get enough. And I was really intrigued by what I saw that they had in Australia at the time. They had, bar none, the typiest Basenjis I had ever seen. And so my husband at the time and I, we were planning to take a trip to Australia just to go. And so I wrote, because this was pre-internet. I mean, I know I'm that old, right?
We're
Pre-internet,
we're both that old, honey.
I wrote a letter to Doreen Duffin there, Makuba Basenjis, and I said, "Hey, Doreen, Scott and I are looking at coming over there, and I'd really like to go to a dog show. Is there anything happening in this general time frame before we book our tickets?" And she said, "Oh my gosh, if you're coming," she said, "we have our specialty in that time frame. Would you come and judge our handling classes?" Which for them, it's not just junior handling; it's handling for people, and it's kind of it's a type of match that they have. So I went and I did that, and I got all my hands on these beautiful dogs. And of course, Doreen knew everyone, and she was telling me, "Oh, there's this dog I want you to see, and that dog you want to see." And I could just, I felt like this was the type that I wasn't seeing in the US at the time, and I
Mhm.
really wanted a piece. So I think that was my first real intrigue, because I
Mhm.
didn't have the opportunity that your audience has now to go and just look on the internet and comb through photos, right? And
Amazing, isn't
there's,
it? The difference that we have today that we didn't have, right? All those years
right,
ago.
yeah, totally. So um, I that's kind of how I got plugged in with that, and then I started learning more about where the populations of Basenjis were around the world, and just
Mhm,
kind of figuring to myself, gee, if Basenjis are different in Texas and different in Washington and not quite as different as what it is in California, but then that's very different than what's in New York and New Jersey.
mhm,
Imagine what's going on in different countries, and what, here's the beauty and the nemesis of, we have a standard that we're interpreting, and how do we read those words, and what do we decide to breed from that?
mhm.
And that's really kind of where it comes down to for me. I've
Yeah.
come to, as I've progressed through my career, I've judged specialties all over the world, and everywhere I go, it's a different population base. And
Mhm,
is it the breed? Yes, it's the same breed, but the variety of styles are different. And in most places, there are things that are attractive about what they have. And just like any place else, you're balancing between different assets and liabilities. And some things you see to my eye are atrocious, and other things that I see, I'm just drooling in envy. I wish that we had.
right.
So um, I I study standards. Of course, if I'm going to be judging overseas, I'm obligated to judge by their standard, not ours. And it's very interesting to see how minutia in just a few words of the standard can make a very big difference to what the dog looks like for the same breed.
So give me a for example, Katie. Give me a for example for Basenjis that people can really tie to.
Okay, so the in England, for instance, with the Kennel Club standard, they say that the tail is well curled. So there's in Basenji's there's a real big push for, like a double curl tail, a triple curl tail. I mean, that in itself, how curly the tail is an asset in that breed, and it's highly coveted and maintained by the gene pool.
Interesting.
Whereas our standard, the AKC standard, says the tail is bent acutely forward and rests on either hip. So it doesn't even say specifically that it needs to be a full loop and how tight it is. There's
Right?
no reference to a double curl tail. And super curly tails are really just sexy here. I
Right.
mean, it there's nothing in the standard that says it has to be that way or that curlier is better and all of that. It's just sexy. Whereas over there, it's part of the standard. So how much angulation a dog has in their dorsal in order to make it curl like that is, um, in my mind, that's a really small thing. And maybe it's because I cut my teeth on Basenjis here in the U.S. And then of course I've been to Democratic Republic of Congo, which is their native homeland, and there you almost never see a double curl tail. It's all pretty much a single curl tail, and it's I don't want to just say it's folklore, but it's widely accepted that the initial Western breeder who was in England that brought the Basenji in, um, uh, selected clearly for these double curl tails,
Mm,
and
mm.
it's really the only thing that we agree that's been put on by breeders. Otherwise, it's a very natural breed and is what it always was.
But I think that's a really fascinating example, hardcore specific example of minor word differences. And I do want to kind of dig into your trip to Africa because it is, as I mentioned, something that we're going to be discussing more at our patrons retreat in August. So everybody should be a patron and come to the retreat because we're going to
Yep.
get to hear some cool stuff from Katie. And do we have Basenji background? I hear Basenji background. I thought I heard a conversant Basenji back there.
Oh, me at my house?
Yeah.
I it goes in one ear out the other. Yes, I'm outside with them. Yes, so
Okay.
you probably.
All right. All right. So that thing about how Basenjis are silent, can I just speak from experience? They're not silent.
Although my neighbors have no idea how many I really have. So
Right. Right.
yeah,
Exactly. And I mean, talk about culture. I mean, this is another culture thing that's kind of a squirrel that we're going to bring to this conversation. The cultures
yeah,
of different breeds. Katie and I used to travel together,
mhm,
if you can
yeah.
just imagine. And I had one trip, a litter of German wire hair pointers with me, young puppies that were just in the motorhome, and they were doing puppy things, right? They're growling and roughhousing and tumbling around. I thought Katie's head was going to come off her body. She's like, "Why do they make that noise? Oh my god!" There's and to the point that I'm pretty sure that was the night you slept on in an X pen because it was so.
Yeah, it was. It was.
It was. And on the flip side, I'd be in you say in one ear and out the other. I'd be in your motorhome and there'd be 13 screaming Basenjis. And I'm like, how do you even like think? I don't understand how you can do this.
I I I much more tolerant of that kind of thing. And in reality, there's much less of that that goes on in the breed. The breed has evolved tremendously in the 30 plus years that I've been breeding.
Right.
It's
Right.
astonishing. And the breed has, I mean, we could go into the minutia of it about what's better and what's worse on, in about the breed in general. But what's tremendously better is the temperament of this breed is by
I have
far.
seen that myself. Yeah.
It's tremendous. And that's really a credit to all of my colleagues who breed Basenji
Mhm.
because we've
Mhm.
made it important. We live in
Right.
a litigious society. You can't have a dog that's not reliable. And there's now lots of Basenjis that do all kinds of work in public and off leash and are reliable. And um, I'm really proud of the group for what they've done. It's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. The breed's done a lot of really good things, no doubt about it. And
Uh-huh.
as part of that, and I think this is, we're talking about global perspective, right? We're talking about what do you see in a Basenji in Poland versus England versus the United States? What do I see in a wire hair pointer, right? So if you see a wire hair pointer in Germany and you put it next to a wire hair pointer in the United States, you would think
Uh-huh.
one of them was not the same breed. Like one of them is wrong because they are so diametrically different.
And you and I have discussed this before, and if I recall, you told me that the original German wire hair pointers in the U.S. were based on Danish stock because that's what
Yeah.
was here.
Hmm.
So,
Yep.
you
And the AKC standard was actually written before the VDD standard. So the Verein Deutsch Drahthaar VDD is the registry for wire hair pointers in Europe. But it's very interesting to see the different emphasis. And again, this goes to culture, right? You were talking about
know,
the global culture in England that the breeders focused on, oh, it should have a curly tail. In wire hair pointers, the focus is on in Germany, and this is not so much about FCI or shows, it's about the if you will, the parent club, right? The overarching registry. They have
right?
breed wardens, for one thing, which of course we don't have in this country. And the breed wardens get to decide what dogs you breed. You don't
Yeah,
get to decide that. So that's a huge difference culturally, huge difference. That's not something we have in the US. And they also put a premium on the working ability of the dogs.
yeah,
And part of the decision that the breed warden makes is whether the dog has passed all of its working clearances. And if it hasn't, it's not allowed to be bred.
yeah.
And if you breed it outside of the system, then you are verboten.
Yeah.
So
That's
culture.
there's a lot to that. I mean, there's we can talk about the innuendos of the FCI system and how that shapes breeding programs too. I mean, talk about cultures, right? I mean, we can talk about the standards. That's one thing, but then when you look at what does your country require to get a championship? I mean, if you're into dogs and into breeding dogs and making that loop, if you're if you're in the FCI system, which has the most dog shows, I mean, globally, I'm quite sure, collectively.
Oh yeah.
Um, the FCI system, you can only get a junior championship until they have to wait until there's a year between, I think, the last set of points
Mhm,
and then
mhm,
a final
mhm.
set of points where they finish.
Right.
So there is no such thing as having, what I've had a handful of times is, a not even quite yet 6, 7 month old champion, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Um, it's fun to have a little rock star puppy, and it's fun to take them out and do all of that. But in FCI, they make you hold them that back.
Right.
And in some
Right.
breeds, I think it makes a really big difference. I was, without naming names, I was noticing recently on Facebook that there was a puppy that was came down from my stock, actually our stock. It was a keeper kid who just
Oh,
recently finished.
I do
And
pinhound for people who are not in the loop. Yes.
yeah, and this particular um, dog I had sort of wondered in my mind. I didn't want to say anything, but I was thinking to myself, I wonder why that dog didn't ever finish. And I was looking at its age and going, it's like 3 or 4, and I noticed, hey, wow, this dog just finished its championship. And it's not that it just finished because it wasn't worthy. He was very worthy, but it takes a while for some breeds to really come into
Mhm,
themselves. And there are the judges who often come from those kinds of breeds that take longer to mature who will not put up a puppy for points. And I'll bet a
Hmm.
lot of knows about that. They'll have a stellar
Hmm.
little, they'll get reserve. They won't get points, they'll go reserve. And
And I think that is so interesting, Katie. And I, I don't know how you feel about it. I love that system, but I'm going to tell you, in some of the breeds that I've judged in the last few months, if I didn't have a puppy to put up, I wouldn't be comfortable using the older dog because dogs are finished so much younger here. And
yes,
I think that many times, not exclusively, but many times, um, we just don't see the depth of quality in the classes. And oftentimes that beautiful puppy really is the best dog in the ring.
but Laura, at the end of the day, as a judge, you can see, that puppy's entered in the puppy class. It's in the puppy class, and now we even have the bred by class split. So it's not
Right.
even,
By puppy.
it's a bred by and it's a puppy, right? So
Right.
there's no secret of how old the dog is, and to me, if AKC did not want us to enable to be able to put up the puppy, we wouldn't be able to put it up.
Mhm.
Just a second, children, quiet.
The Singies.
Uh, so, uh, so it you know, if we weren't allowed to put them up, then there would be some kind of proviso that we couldn't put them up. I think I'm very committed to putting up the dog on the day. I'm just
Mhm.
to me that's part
Yep.
of the fast of the whole game. Is that
Yep.
there's all variables of which dogs came to play that day, how are they feeling, did the handler make it to the ring on time? Is the dog just off? Did somebody bring out a puppy that was just, a dork in every handling class that they attended and then suddenly steps over the threshold of the ring and thinks that they're Lady Gaga, right?
God's
Just goes,
gift. Right. Yeah, exactly.
all of those things can happen. That's part of what is to me, it's part of the game, is those variables that you don't have all the control over it. And
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that keeps us humble in dog shows. And I think about all the people I see, on social media or I talk to at the dog show, and they're all wound up about X, Y, or Z. And I just think, dog shows been keeping me humble for a lot of years.
that's what,
Because dogs, as I tell people all the time, they are dogs. They are not machines. And judges are people, and they were not hatched from eggs. And so it is that availability for variability, as they would say, right? That
right.
anything can happen, sort of air about it.
It's true. And I mean, we can do a lot of research on a given judge. Like, somebody's coming up and you don't know who they are, right? You have no idea. There's lists out there, but I personally wouldn't
Take
encourage
them.
people.
Take them.
What I would
No.
do, if you really want to get an insight about them, ask your friends, sure. But go
Listen
to
to
the
Pure Dog Talk. Find out if there's an episode with them in their own voice talking about judging dogs.
there's a good one. And
There's
another
a good
one, to
one.
go to the AKC online judging directory and find out what their initial breeds were, because then you'll know which culture they came from.
Right.
Do they come from a culture where, the dogs take a long time to come together, or are they in one of those breeds that puppies do a lot of winning? Um,
Toys, for example.
yeah. So there's a lot of, that's part of the fun of why I think smart people can be captivated by this game for decades, because it does, there's so much to learn and so much to see and so many different cultures within our dog show culture. It's really fun. So
Well, and back to our global perspective, that's part of it, right? Is adding to those layers. And we had a comment, Jamie was just commenting that one of the challenges that she's had, and for the audience, for you, Katie, Jamie has an FSS breed called a Drever, and
yeah,
the in the inability to use the breed as designed, it's a deer hunting dog, and it very much limits who will export puppies to the United States.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about exporting and getting a hold of dogs and doing that.
Yes. Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
I, I and I know that I've been fortunate this way, and all I can do is just speak about myself and how I've made it happen. But when people have talked to me about getting a dog from me that are from overseas, I always reply and I'm always friendly, but I say to them, you need to know that I will need references from people that we can come together and, play 6 degrees of separation, but I'm going to need 3 references. And then also I let them know that when it comes to the dog, I will not ship the dog. The price of the dog includes me flying the dog, which, by the way, is almost always the same or very close to just shipping cargo.
Shipping it.
To go with
Right.
myself plus the dog. So yes, that takes some time, and not everybody can do it. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to arrange that quite a few times. And I say to them, if I don't like what I see, and you're not who and what you said, and the quarters aren't who and what you said, I'm just taking the dog home, and there's no money exchanged.
Mhm.
And
And
that,
I think that is it. You do have the luxury there that not everybody does have.
right,
And I think that it is the 6 degrees of separation is how so many people have to manage it, right? Is,
that,
"Oh, I know so and so, and they know so and so, and, oh, so we know the same," that kinda thing. It's almost like a small town in South Carolina. That's basically how the dog world works.
on this one, Laura, because if somebody wants your dog badly enough because you have a bloodline of something that they need,
Mm,
they're going to be willing to pay for that dog to come over there, and they would be paying cargo. You would wrap that into the price. Anybody would.
mhm, mhm,
So if you're not willing to go deliver that dog, to go check it out and make sure that it's true, I mean, they're going to pay your trip. You're going to stay
right,
in their, I mean, expectation is you're going to stay in their home. They're going to take care of you. You're going to learn this culture. You get this opportunity to see how people care for their dogs and what the dog's daily life is going to be, and how people who live in different countries and have different living situations can also take lovely care of a dog, even though it's not exactly like how you do it.
mhm,
It's an amazing opportunity. Amazing. And it's very rewarding to be able to send a dog overseas, where to a country or to an individual that really needs what you know you're genetically prepotent for. I
mhm,
mean, you can really help them. It's not just the glamorous thing of being able to say you sent something overseas. It's about this global perspective of sharing gene pools across continents. We've
mhm.
come to that. Just in my career, we've come to that.
Yeah, yeah, just
I
in
mean,
our really just in our time. I mean, when we first
absolutely.
started.
Our mothers never would have done this, Laura. I
No,
mean,
no.
did your
Beth
mothers? Your
Young, I mean, back
mom,
in the early '80s, Beth Young imported some clumbers from Sweden, and there were a few clumbers imported from England and some of that kind of stuff. But sending dogs back to other countries, it's taken until now. Like Doug Johnson talks about it, Wendy Paquette talks about it. I think
yeah,
certain breed cultures are more open to this, right? So when I was just in South Korea, you know, honestly, the strength of the dogs in South Korea was in the toy group, in the smaller breeds, the truly that they're in an environment that's mostly urban, not entirely,
yeah,
but largely.
oh,
They don't have room. Nobody, I mean, there's one wire hair pointer in the country, and I know the guy, right? Like, it's one. So I think that kind of breed culture, right, is a thing, and
it,
the country's overall thing is part of the
oh,
deal.
oh, totally. I mean, I took a trip. I had a friend who was living in Indonesia for a year, and I
Mm,
went to go with my friend. And we decided to go to dog shows. And my friend, it was Dr. Darren, who lined up having us go to look going to some kennels, not the same kennels per se necessarily, but just to go see some people and what
Right.
what do they look like over there. And it's the first of all, it's in the tropics, which for us living up in the Pacific Northwest is just a completely different deal, right? Of what you can do. And initially, I was just mortified at what I saw. And then I started thinking, wait a minute, this is actually really practical. I mean, this one guy that very well known kennel there in Indo had, you know, um, uh, dog areas that were carved out of a hill per se. So, they had dirt on the ground and it was kind of a dirt cave. And initially I was thinking that's just horrible. And then I started thinking about it and it's going, wow, that's cool. They get out of the heat. They can get in and out of it. There's all of these different things that you kind of go, huh, I never thought of it that way. And
Right.
um, there was a guy in Golden Retrievers that we went to go see, and he was absolutely crazy for Golden Retrievers. And Indonesia, unlike the U.S., I mean, it's kind of a caste system of people. It's the haves and the have-nots, and
Mhm.
there's not a lot. And that's not something that we see in America. It's not. If you think that's the way it is in America, you haven't been to Indo. So, this guy came from have it type of the haves. And he had a full staff of people that were working. He had a whole beautiful home that was exclusively for the dog. And he had, a second and third and fourth bedroom in that house that had, where he could come and have his friends who liked golden retrievers and they would spend the night in the kennel and have a kennel party night over there and look at
Oh
all the
my
dogs.
gosh. Oh
Bring,
my god.
I mean, and and absolutely lovely, absolutely lovely. And he was, I'm not a golden retriever expert. I've fancied the breed for a long time, but I've never owned one. And I took this out and I said, and like I usually say to people, "Ooh, I really like this dog. May I move this dog?" Because I get a lot. It's a Katieism, but I get a lot out of the dog when I move it myself. So I was moving this dog, and this guy said to me, "Oh my God, you're wonderful with this dog. You are really a slick handler." And it's like, I'm a competent handler. I mean, I'm not super fantastic, but I'm a very competent handler. And so he says, next dog show, it's coming up in 3 months. I'll fly you over to come show my dog. And it's like, I mean, we don't have anybody like that here, do we? I mean, that's just not our culture.
Right. And so I think that's a huge piece of it, right? That culture piece, and I was really struck in South Korea, very small. I mean, it was a dog show that had what, 75, maybe 100 dogs in the day total. And I judged one show and the Korean judge judged the other show and I judged all the dogs at the dog show and it was fantastic to see. um I mean, nobody likes to lose when they think they should win or whatever, but a very professional, very polite culture in which people didn't, stomp and spit and do things that we see here. I was really struck by that. I thought that was really refreshing. Um, and for a small number of dogs, the quality of the individual dogs that I found, my best in show winner could win in the US hands down going away easily.
Yeah, yeah,
Beautiful, beautiful dachshund. So and so I think to me that's part of the treasure that I found when I
right.
went overseas just now.
Well, and glad you had that opportunity. And I guess that's the caution that I would have for people who are kind of caught up in the romantic notion of acquiring from overseas or sending overseas is that if it goes into the wrong hands, you could wind just like in the U.S. could wind up in a puppy mill. don't, if you're not careful.
No
And
different than here. Yep.
yeah, and um, people who haven't been breed for a very long time, they come and go. I mean, the average person still in conformation is running about 5 years, right? And if they breed a few litters, they have a kennel name, they have a couple of litters, but it's yours that persists behind it. People come looking for you when they're wondering why their boo boo head is going blind at a young age, or, you know, how much cancer have you had in your family and all of that kind of stuff. It'll come back to you, it won't come to that other person. So, um, there's a lot of responsibility about it. So like I said, I'm going to push back on that when you think that it's a real luxury to go see where the dogs go. If you want to play the game on a global scale and you want to have that type of opportunity for your own bloodline to bring in something that's truly novel, that's going to expand your domestic gene pool, bring in something that not only you can use, but maybe others will, that you would also consider allowing somebody else
So
to use.
you're saying it's not just when you go and deliver a puppy that you sell overseas, you're recommending to people when they buy a dog, go overseas, see the litter. Don't just expect somebody's going to magically sell you the best dog.
Right. And I mean, it's, going and shopping for airline tickets is just like anything else. You can plan it, you can make it happen. If it's worth your time, you'll do it. There, um, you can do things quickly overseas now, unlike we used to be able to.
Right.
It was hard. You can do it fast, but it's just like anything else. If you don't invest your time and effort into it, you're gonna you're gonna get back as much as you put into it. And if
Right.
you die quickly, someone's likely to get screwed or disappointed at some point.
Right.
So, if you're, it's all of that aside with what comes on with the dogs, I think it's really good for everyone to have that reality check that the way you do things, the way your local club does things, and maybe what the culture of your parent club is, that doesn't mean that that's the way that people steward your breed all over the world.
Right.
You may be able to find, if you don't like your parent club or your local breed club, you might be able to find community, genuine community, get to know these people who are overseas. I mean, anything's possible with the internet. I mean,
Right.
um, I, I, I serve as the delegate for that represents the Basenji to the AKC, and I go to these delegate meetings, and I talk to people who are passionate about some other breed,
Mm-hmm.
talk to them about the cultures of their parent club. And it's sad, and I don't want to dwell on bad sad things, but there are some parent clubs out there and some individuals who want to be very elite about who gets to join them and be part of their community, and there are others that are essentially open. If you want to
Mm-hmm.
join us, we want to have you be part of us.
Yeah.
And I can't think of an exception of when the more inclusive club isn't the one that really wins out with having the people and the manpower and the youth and the commitment and the long-term commitment
Right.
better than those clubs that are open and inclusive. Great example that comes to mind is Leonbergers. Leonbergers, I have, just, come in the last maybe what, 15, 20 years. I'd need to go check.
Right.
And
Very.
they've got something like 500 households or more that belong to them. I mean, and they're active. They have companion people who belong to the parent club who are actually active, not just lurking. They, they allow to have a culture where we're just going to come and have our big specialty, and we're going to celebrate Leonbergers. Not
Right.
It's not about who's going to win. It's about
Right.
getting together and learning and celebrating our breed. And I've learned so much from that too. I mean, it, why can't we have more of that? Um,
Why
another
can't we
example.
indeed? That is a question. Okay, speaking of questions, sorry
Yeah.
to segue, but we're down to the last little bit. Anybody with
Okay.
questions for Katie or I, drop them in the comments, drop them in the chat. We'll be able to answer them for you. And while we're waiting on questions, Katie, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about the story that I think is just fascinating and give people an overview of the Basenji Club of America and their efforts to go to Africa to bring new breeding stock to improve a health issue within the breed.
Sure.
And
So,
then a little bit about your trip, but not only a little bit because we're saving that for Chicago.
yep. Okay. So, backstory: the Basenji, every breed in the past has had their nemesis of, some kind of health problem that they have
Many
to
of them
watch.
still have the same nemesis. C. What is the plural of nemesis? Okay.
So, the when I got started in the breed 30 plus years, it's Fanconi syndrome, and actually, I don't even think that it was quite named when I first got started. And then a lot of the Saints died of it. It was a late onset disease. It was renal
Right.
kidney failure. So their bodies basically starved themselves to death. The horrific death, no cure, no way to test for it. That you could do at the time was um, do a urine strip sample and just see how much sugar was in the urine, and if it had sugar, it probably had protein, so they were spilling their nutrients, and that was the beginning of the end. And I'm paraphrasing. I know there's a lot more behind it, but that was the deal. So we looked into what there might be of Basenji still available in not just the political area, but the natural area where they are indigenous to the land, which is currently the Democratic Republic of Congo. It had previously, same geographical area, previously called the Belgian Congo. Africa, as you know, the political lines change all the time. It's a very tribal continent, and there's a lot of, for lack of a better term, warfare there. It's just a different type of war amongst tribes and people. So it's tough to get there. Um, you don't want to go during rainy season. You don't want to go during because you can't get through on the roads. You can't go when it's too hot because it's super oppressive, over 100 degrees. And of course, there's pretty much no air conditioning. And then you also want to go when the puppies are available, and that's a seasonal thing. For those of you who don't know, it's a phenomenon in the breed that they Basenji bitches 90 plus 95% come into season at the kiss of autumn, and the Basenjis, the puppies are whelped then 2 months later, and it's true. Autumn being September October here in the northern hemisphere, and it's the flip with March and April in the southern hemisphere. I know it's really strange, but it's true. And so we wanted to go see when the puppies were there. So I was asked to go, primarily, I think, because not just my years in the breed and what success I had had to date, but um, I I think it surprised a lot of people that I really enjoy traveling in third world countries, and I like the ruggedness of it. I think it's really a lovely, um, a way to go back in time and see how us people live. I think is important. So we had thought that if we could go back and get some more dogs, there
So
had been
your so remind me, your trip was in, and I know this, 2011.
20, yeah, 20, right.
2011, and that was the third trip that had been under the BCOA auspices, or the fourth?
Well, when it's saying BCOA auspices, it's it's John Kirby, and who's our judge's education coordinator. By the way, if
Mhm.
you ever get a chance to see his program, he starts it off with a bunch of personal film that he took of his trips. He took many trips, and Michael Work went with him. So together they were pulling from the BCOA roster, and they occasionally would ask people from that were Basenji experts in other parts of the world to come and join. Um, uh, but it was we were hoping that if it was inherited, and if Fanconi, which was this killer disease, was inherited, that maybe we could go to Africa and get them from there, and they wouldn't have it. Um, the Australians at the time said that they didn't have it, and um, a lot of Americans didn't think that could possibly be true and that they were sweeping it under the rug. But I think it's their their gene pool had been so tight. I think it's entirely possible that they had clears that they were working with for decades before they got more global importation. And that's kind of the other thing about global imports is we bring in stuff you've never seen before, not
Right.
always in a good
So,
way.
yeah, my mother, and I know you and I have talked about this, my mother used to swear every single time she did any kind of an outcross, whether it was an imported dog, which we bred to, or, just domestic, whatever, she'd get, one thing she wanted and 10 things she didn't. So that's an important thing to take into consideration. And that is for real, whether you're importing wild dogs from Africa or or just a dog from, a random, you know, civilized
Oh,
country.
It's, I mean, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but that's the whole thing about talking about the benefits of line breeding.
Mhm.
You limit your number of variables that you're working with. Every time you do an outcross, you're bringing in a whole new set of variables for you to wonder in the future, where did that come from? Well, if you keep outcrossing, it came back from something that you did maybe 4 generations ago, and you're never probably going to figure it out. So I'm a big I really like line breeding. Naturally, of course, I outcross from time to time, but I'm very careful, and I'm a big fan of if I've sold a dog or placed a dog with somebody, and then they go and they breed and do something, I pick up something down the road from
Right,
that one
right,
because I get to see what the progress has been and what success they had, and then I can pull back in what that
right,
it'll work with what I've got and have
right.
some familiar. But anyway, so the Africa trip. So we were hoping that we would be able to get away from Fanconi with these
Mhm.
African dogs that came in. Another big thing that we were looking at is that the fronts and shoulders had really gone out the window with domestic stock, and we were looking to strengthen that again. And those things really came to be with the Basenji stock. Um, there's a lot of backstory that goes with it, and what the feelings of the Basenji Club of America membership felt about it when they came back in.
Mhm.
Uh, we had close ties with the American Kennel Club at the time, with people who were on the board of directors, and that was really fortunate to be able to have people in your breed who were active and participating in AKC matters when you want something from AKC, because then
Right.
you already have a relationship established that's earnest
Mhm.
and sincere, that they can really hear you out and hear why you want to do it, why it's important, and you can often persuade them that it makes sense. Because if it makes sense to you for your breed, AKC doesn't control your breed, your parent club
Right.
does.
Your
But
club does.
right, so um, so that's a lot of the things that came out of it. It's the trip itself was, I often describe it to people, it's, if you're a Basenji owner, if you're a Basenji fancier, it's like going to Mecca for Basenji people. The only breed that you see there far and wide. They have a lot of different styles. Some of them could be shown. Most of them would just be considered pet quality here.
Mhm.
So you can really see how the very early breeders who were shaping the breed initially in the Western world, how they shaped it,
Mm, mm.
developed a standard off of what they shaped, um, which kind of parallels what you were talking about with, making your standard in wire hairs, that, it was
Mhm.
off of Danish stock. It's because that's what you've got. That's what you've brought the breed to at that
Mhm.
time.
Yep.
So I guess, thinking as we're starting to get towards the end of it, what this, global inclusiveness and diversity means is that there's a lot of different ways to look at your breed. And yes, you should always be breeding toward your standard, but it's important to take a look at how the standards and cultures differ in different
Mhm.
political areas of the world. And the more that you can actually experience that, the
Right.
more knowledgeable you truly will become, because you will develop empathy. You will see the that there are more than one way to make to come to a similar outcome,
Right.
and are life skills that beyond dogs, just being a human being and being able to survive frustration. It's
Right.
a wonderful, it's a wonderful gift.
Absolutely. So, Katie, we have a question from Courtney Bates, and she wants to know. I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to let you just do it because I don't know. It's up on the screen. Do you have to breed for a certain number of generations with these import dogs for the puppies to be recognized by the American Kennel Club? I know the desert bred Salukis need a generation four for full registration.
Yeah, and that just kind of goes. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. It kind of depends who you know at AKC. So what what happened with us, and I know we were fortunate, is that we had such credible people that went to go get them. Dammer Bolte, Michael Burke, John Kirby, um, uh, uh, for starters, and
In
their
some of
names.
them, yeah, those really, and you guys, if you're a longtime listener of the podcast, go back, or if you're not, go keyword search the podcast with Damra Bolte because she talks about that first BCOA trip. It was amazing.
Yeah, and it's when you have people like that going and collecting the dogs, AKC knows who they are. So I guess what that brings me to is if you're thinking about making a trip or going and getting native stock like that, the more connections that you have with AKC and the more transparent you are, like invite somebody on the board of directors to, or that's the chair of the parent club committee or somebody like that to come and
Mhm.
greet you at the airport or come to your home when you have all of the dogs in quarantine in your home and come see them and talk to you about it and
Mhm.
see what you're doing so that it's not just this random
Right,
person. No
right.
offense, but they don't know everybody. You don't know all of them. They don't know all of us either. They're human.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
when, when you have people going that have that credibility, that helps. So to answer the question, no, we did not, and that was highly controversial at the time. And to be truthful, I was one of the people who thought, oh, we should be breeding 3 generations of these to proof them first. But then when I went to DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, and could see like, oh my God, there just is not, you can't see another breed. There isn't anything else here.
Mm.
It's not going to be a crossbred because there's nothing else here, which for us is just not fathomable, right? But the
Right.
whole, the we were not in consumption. We were hundreds of miles from there. We were, literally out in the boonies, like the jungles. There is no train service. There is no bus service. There is no paved roads of any kind. Only the chief has a car. Nobody else owns a car. It's it's so primitive. It's like turning the dial back at least 100 years. And when all you see there is Basenjis because nothing's coming in with dogs. That's the whole thing. The way that you get those crossbreeds and things is other people bringing dogs in. And who would bring their dog to a place like that? I mean, it would be missionaries maybe, but they don't.
Mhm.
That's just the way it is. And
Fabulous.
when we do the show in
Mm.
the presentation in Chicago, you and I
Mhm.
have been playing for years. I hope to be able to show my personal photos from there. I have
Yeah,
about 500.
we'll have there's going to be a whole presentation. I'm very excited. And we are out of time, shockingly enough, because Katie and I together, I mean, you think I'm bad, y'all. Katie and I together can jack our jaws for an hour and we're like, oh, look at time just flew.
So true.
so, so true. I mean, we can do this literally. We do this on a regular basis. So we're super glad that you guys got to join us for this amazing conversation with my dear friend. And just remember next month, two things, two tiny little things. If you are around for the Tacoma Kennel Club and you can come join us for the self defense workshop, that is open to everyone. That is not just for patrons. That's number one. Number two, come and join us in Chicago. Katie's going to be guiding tours. I'm going to be doing some handling classes. There's going to be a patrons retreat. There's going to be a whole patron seminar on the Africa trip. It's going to be amazing. And
Oh,
finally, what?
plug, shameless plug. With
Shameless
the
plug.
shameless plug. If any of your Pure Dog Talk followers would be interested in being a tour guide at Chicago, I would love to have this kind of group do it.
Yes.
These you folks have been you a lot of you came and helped me out in January, and you were
In Schaumburg.
amazing. And it was for those who did it for me, I thank you tremendously, and I hope you'll come back. We'd love to have more, so reach out to me or to Laura. I'm sure you can facilitate passing off names, but it's a great opportunity and really really fun, so
It's
please
a
consider.
blast. And Katie is amazing and she will train you how to do the whole thing. So, anyway, we hope to see you all either in Tacoma or in Chicago, or the one I haven't even gotten to talk about, which is Texas, Belton, Texas, in October. Whew. I know, right? Thanks, you guys. Have a great night. We
Thanks, bye.
appreciate you. Thanks for joining us on Pure Dog Talks live at 5. All right, Katie. Thanks, honey.
Yeah, bye
Bye.
bye.